welcome to Elements of Ayurveda, Empowering Wisdom of Life. I'm your host, Colette, and in this podcast, I hope to empower you to take charge of your own health by sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. We will also discuss topics like health and wellness, nutrition, yoga, fitness, meditation, breath work, and much more, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to each other. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the show, and the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend you listen to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now, here's the show. Hey, before we start the show, did you know that I'm hosting an Ayurveda and Yoga retreat right here on the French Riviera this October, the 11th to the 13th, a 3-day weekend of connection, education, and relaxation. We're going to enjoy lots of talks on Ayurveda, yoga classes, and Ayurvedic workshops, and we're going to hang out in this lovely medieval village which is just outside Nice, and Nice has the international airport, so it's really easy to access. If you're interested, please check out my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com/retreat. And until July 31st, I have a special discount if you book before July 31st. So check it out. I would love to have you here and connect with you in person. It will be fantastic. So I hope you can join us. Okay, now let's get on with the show. Hello and welcome to Elements of Ayurveda. Today I'm joined by the lovely Amy. Hello, Amy.
Good morning. So happy to be here.
Likewise, we always love our conversations. And today, well, every conversation is a juicy one and an important one. But today, I feel this is a very important one. We want to talk about diversity and the importance of diversity. So I'm really looking forward to getting into a discussion on this, Amy. And, you know, of course, I started by looking up in the dictionary because I like to do that, just to kind of start with a foundation. So when I looked up diversity, the meaning of diversity in the Cambridge English Dictionary, it said that diversity is the fact of many different types of things or people being included in something. And then from the American English Dictionary, it said diversity is the condition or fact of being different or varied. Now, in doing a little bit of research on this topic, I came across this book called Workforce America. It was from 1991, and the authors were Loden and Rosner. And they talked about something really interesting, which was dimensions of diversity. And they wrote that people usually define diversity as gender or race. But in objective terms, they said, diversity is vast. It's an eclectic array of human, physical, and cultural differences. And these dimensions that they describe are the properties and characteristics that constitute the whole person. Now, in this book, they explain that there are two dimensions, which I want to explain to you real quick. There is the primary dimensions of diversity, and these are the ones that we are either born with or which impact us early in life, early in the socialization process, and continue throughout our lives. So these primary dimensions, these core elements, are age, ethnicity, gender, physical abilities, race, and sexual orientation. And then there's the secondary dimensions, and these are differences that are acquired or discarded and or modified throughout our lives and include things like education, geographic location, income, marital status, parental status, religious beliefs, and work experience. Now, they went on to say that these dimensions significantly influence values, perceptions, and prior experiences, and therefore provide us with a unique perspective about our environment. And what these dimensions show is that we are all similar and different on an infinite number of dimensions, and so we should all care about and support diversity. And that's why I want to start with that spiel, Amy, because I think it's a great way to help people understand that there's so like the diversity, we are so vast, and there's so many different ways of looking at diversity, and therefore we should all care about it and support it, and it should be something that we're all very aware of.
Yes, I gave a talk in Japan a few months ago about diversity, and I used the analogy of cross-pollination, that when you look at Mother Nature and how it is that, cross-pollination occurs and what are the benefits of cross-pollination, you can see that the plants that have had this cross-pollination are stronger. They can resist, different types of weather and conditions. They come out with new and creative ways of expressing themselves. They are part of a larger system that supports things that otherwise might not be supported. I mean, there's so many benefits. If we just look at Mother Nature, you can see that it's actually the law of the universe that this is supposed to happen.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more, because, and I'm going to riff on that a little bit too, because I too was thinking about that and saying that, we see diversity is necessary in everything on the planet. I was thinking about pollination too, and the diversity in the flowers in order to sustain these pollinator bees, right? So like you're saying that they can sustain themselves. Diversity in our microbiome. So we have this healthy, resilient gut microbiome that relies on biodiversity. Diversity in our wildlife. Every species plays a really important role, and which leads to, a better ecosystem that's, again, sustainable. Diversity in our food, our nutrients, our vitamins, our minerals, and, diversity, like when we look at the rainforest, all the species there. So exactly right. Nature shows us that diversity is important. And in Ayurveda, we want to align ourselves with nature. And so understanding that diversity is important in a holistic view of the world, rather than this reductionist thinking of, I only take care of me or mine, or like wanting to shut some people out. Well, it's not sustainable. It's not going to work in the long term. And we just have to look to nature to see that this is what's required of us.
And it's happening whether we want it or not. I mean, personally, I want it, but there are people who don't, that are, trying to stop it from happening. And I mean, history shows us that this is not going to work. It's moving forward. So we might as well, even if you're not on board right now, you might as well get on board and stop swimming upstream. It is here. It is now. We are all in this together, and especially as yoga and Ayurvedic practitioners, this is a huge opportunity for us to grow spiritually, mentally, emotionally, to understand ourselves better. I mean, there's no other route. We need to move forward in this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so how do you see in the yoga therapy community that you can bring in more diversity?
Well, you might know that this is a topic of mine dear to my heart. I was born to two civil rights activists that throughout my whole life, starting in the womb, I was marching in the streets of Milwaukee in the 1970s. And
weren't you born on a certain, you were born on a day?
Oh, yes. I was born on Women's Liberation Day.
That's right. I knew there was some
August 26th. Yeah, 1970. So, this has been a passion of mine. My parents, have fought for LGBTQ rights. This is just in my genes, that whether I want to or not, because it's really hard work, this is what I'm here to do. And so when I look at our yoga therapy community, and even our greater yoga community, and probably Ayurveda also, I see that there are many barriers to entry for people of color, for people, who are maybe young people that can't afford to go through an expensive training. I see that we do not have very many men in our communities, which is very interesting. You look at all the different ways we have diversity through race and ethnicity and gender and age and socioeconomic status. We're very, very homogeneous in our yoga and yoga therapy and Ayurvedic communities. So we need to make an effort to welcome people, to let them know it's safe, that we value them, we value their ideas, their beliefs, their perceptions. We're willing to listen, that we're not standing, on the pedestal looking down at them saying, oh, we can help you, you poor thing. Let me give you some free yoga lessons. That's not what we're doing. We're actually inviting people to the table. We're inviting them to the conversation to let us know what would be helpful in their local communities. Or, when I talk to 20-year-old college kids, like, they have a completely different needs and beliefs and perceptions than I do about yoga. And when they tell me what works for them and what they're looking for, I feel like, okay, well, that's not for me. But if that's going to bring healing to your age group, well, then let's do that. Right. But you're as the young person going to take the lead for bringing it into your community, and I'm going to support that. Right?
See, and that's what we get. With diversity comes benefits like that, like new perspectives, whole new way of looking at things, because they've had different life experiences and can show us different ways and different avenues that maybe we could never think of relaying
we're
information.
Not capable.
Right.
We're incapable.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Because we just don't have that experience. But I must say, like, getting the podcast out there, this is a great way of getting this information to people. It's free, it's accessible. And, I'm getting now, I notice quite a lot of people coming to me that are like a diverse group of people, which I love. But this is, why we want the diversity, because it's colorful, it's rich, and we can gain so much from it. And it'll bring not only new perspectives, but I think it brings greater productivity, and it also gives us, with these new ideas and this new creativity, more incentive and more courage as well to go into areas that we maybe wouldn't have gone by ourselves.
I was talking to Bill Bennett, who's the founder of the PYP, the Prison Yoga Project. Okay. And he basically brings yoga teachers and yoga therapists into prisons to have that population experience yoga. And what he said that just hit me like an arrow in the heart is everyone should be able to benefit from yoga, asana, pranayama, meditation, Ayurveda. Why is it just that a select group of people have gotten to experience this? We need to bring it to people who traditionally don't know anything about it, don't know it exists, don't know how it can help them. Mm-hmm. And we need to create bridges or partnerships with organizations and people that will not help us into the door, but rather we support them in bringing it to their community. There's a difference there for me. Then, I had someone say, well, we tried having some diversity efforts. We made diverse yoga classes and we offered free transportation, and they could come to the studio and take yoga classes, and nobody ever showed up, and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, maybe they don't want to come into the all-white yoga studio and feel like they're the only one and take the special transportation to get there. I mean, maybe someone would, and that's fantastic. I applaud that. But why aren't we giving a scholarship to someone in a community that will just bring it right there to the civic center or the library or wherever they want to, meet? Mm-hmm. Why aren't we offering it in a way that's easy, gives access, and is delivered in a way that different types of people are comfortable with?
So true. And it is so sad to think that within the Ayurveda and the yoga community, that there is just a certain group that's getting benefits from that. Of all healing therapies, for Ayurveda and yoga to be just given to a certain group. And unfortunately, sometimes in the West, we package things up and, it becomes a business. And then, then it becomes out of reach for some people. We've seen the rise of yoga and how much now these retreats are costing, and they're huge amounts of money. So it's sad to see that. But I think, like you said, there has to be programs put in place that go into the community and that, meet people where they are. Some of those yoga studios are so intimidating. I was intimidated, in some of them when I was teaching in California. they're just so
I won't go in
intimidating.
there. I won't. People say, why don't you teach in LA more? And I say, because I don't feel comfortable teaching yoga in LA. The body type, the way that I am in the world doesn't seem to fit. And this is coming from a white woman who is educated and basically should fit into the norm. I don't even feel comfortable there, so I can't even imagine.
Right, exactly. So it's so important to have programs in place that meet people where they are and going into their communities, because it's such a huge step to already do yoga. But then if you have to travel outside of your own community and go into this space where it just feels uncomfortable to you, it just leads to so many obstacles along the way and really kind of can put people off. So,
I heard this amazing podcast. I can't remember the name of the two Indian women that are doing it, and I wish I could off the top of my head, but they had a podcast that says white women killed yoga. And it was very serious.
Yeah.
And they basically said, we're Indian women, and when we go into, certain yoga studios and teacher trainings, we're not respected as, the culture that provided the U.S. and other westernized countries with yoga. We're told how to say Sanskrit words that is incorrect. Like just from growing up, they know how to speak.
Oh my goodness, and they're corrected.
And they're being corrected.
Oh my God,
and
cringeworthy.
Just so many, so many things happen to them that just, it is cringeworthy. Yeah. And so this is why I hope a podcast like you and I talking, two white women talking, can help to create a difference for a lot of white women that don't even know that they're doing microaggressions, including you and I on this podcast.
Right. Exactly. We could say things that some people
we
could
are
take
saying
on.
things. I guarantee. I mean, I have given a speech recently about diversity, and I got some really nice feedback in a very positive kind way that let me know, hey, you missed some things, or look, when you said this, that didn't quite land the way you intended, probably. And I appreciate that, and I hope on this podcast, when we are doing these things, that people will kindly call us out. But the point is, we're making an effort to walk into a territory that's a little bit scary. It takes a little courage to get on here and pretend that we know something about diversity and that we're willing to have these conversations. And, the other day on Facebook, I saw someone make a kind of an unconscious comment about diversity. And I just went in and kindly said, hey, as another white woman, we have to make an effort. We're, let's give this a try, and let's open our ears and listen and learn and try to become more open to the feedback that people might give us.
Right. Absolutely. And, I'm going to explain a little bit about, my life and growing up and, how I've experienced diversity as well. I grew up in Ireland. Not much diversity happening there when I was there. I was born mid-70s, 80s, 90s. I went to college in Dublin, and Dublin was the capital city. Then there was, no diversity at that stage. Now there is, but not back then. And then I went to Boston, the US. And so I knew nobody there, and I was like, okay, where do I go live? I have no idea. So, people were like, well, you're Irish and you should go to the Irish section of town, because in Boston, there's, there were sections. There was the North End with the Italians, and there was Chinatown, and then there was Southie, which is the Irish area, and so on. I was like, okay, I had no idea. I was so naive. So I went to the Irish Southie area, and they thought I'd fit in great with the Irish community, but I didn't want to be in Ireland in Boston. You know what I mean? I mean, I could do this at home, and so I wanted new experiences. That was something I craved. And at one stage, I brought some friends back who were not white to the apartment, and I was told the next day through the grapevine that I shouldn't bring those people into the neighborhood. Honestly, I was like this naive, at that stage, what was I, 20? I was so naive and green. I could not believe someone had said that to me. it was like, what are you talking about? But in Boston, back in the day, there was a lot of trouble between the races in Boston. But so then I left that neighborhood because I was like, this is not for me. And I went to another neighborhood. But, it was just so interesting to see that. And then, in my relationships have been interracial. So I have been in interracial relationships and, seen a different perspective of this, especially, I don't want to get into about race relations in Boston, but it was just onto the surface then, in an interracial relationship back in the early 90s, there was a lot of comments openly said, and people had lots of issues with it. So it was just interesting. So I've had, my eyes opened, seeing it from the other side, not saying that, I know what it's like, because I'm still white and I still definitely got a lot of privileges in Boston. A lot of people were like, come work with me. The little, white Irish girl who, the Irish American man who, has Irish parents would have loved the white Irish woman to come work for him. And that just also that just also drove me nuts. That I could see doors opening for me just because I was white and I was from Ireland. And then I see my boyfriend and he's having such a hard time, just doing simple tasks every day and just having such a hard time in the world. And here's me and I get off so lightly just because of my skin color, it's just, that has opened my eyes up hugely to these issues of diversity.
Gail Parker is a woman who educates on race-based trauma injury and just how it can, basically change the way your nervous system works, change, your perception, change your fear response, put you into your amygdala, the part of your brain that's got fear. Like it basically hijacks your whole system and changes your life.
Absolutely.
And I mean, these are things that a lot of people with privilege have never had to think about.
No idea.
It's never occurred to them.
No, it's crazy. When my friends or my partner is like saying, oh, I had to explain to, my daughter how to react if she gets pulled over, or how to, present yourself when the cops start asking you questions, because it could be a matter of life or death, in the U.S. these days. And that's so crazy that, just day-to-day living. But it's unfortunately, it's something that is normal life for a lot of people. But for those of us who happen to be born with white skin, it's something that a lot of times we can't even comprehend. There's a TED interview that I have fallen in love with. And, you have TED Talks, which are about 17 minutes. And then sometimes if they want to expand on those issues, they'll do a 60-minute talk as a TED interview. And the one that I've just fallen in love with, her name is Melody Hobson, MELLODYHOBSON. And she's a Wall Street financial guru who happens to be a Black woman and has a firm that has values around promoting diversity and having different perspectives and knowing that we're stronger when we have these different perspectives. But oftentimes in her life, in this podcast, she talks about how people assume she's been the recipient of affirmative action, right,
when in fact she earned her own way every step of the way. But let's say that she was a recipient of affirmative action. Do you know how much harder she's had to work every single step of the way as a Black woman? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
The things that happen to people who, and again, it goes back to young, old, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, education. When I talk about diversity, I'm talking about all of it. That there are things that we all have to work through that make it way harder for us. And so is it such a bad thing if someone reaches out a hand and says, hey, you're impressive. I really like you. I think you're amazing. Will you come and be part of our organization? And I want to welcome you and your perspective and your ideas. Like, why is that such a horrible thing.
Right, exactly. Because if you're starting for somewhere where the odds are stacked against you,
right?
Systemically.
Yes. Systemically.
Yeah, exactly.
Not just personally. I mean, it is personal too, but the system is stacked.
It is. It's horrendous. It really is such an issue in the world, and it's so deep rooted. But, we really do need to come together and be stronger together in order to survive. And we can see it, even on a planetary and climate change. There was a report that came out the other day that say that, the rich will survive if there is this climate catastrophe because they will be able to afford, to fly in water or whatever. But it's the poorer communities who won't be able to survive. So because of what's happening, in parts of the world where there's oil drilling and fracking and icebergs melting and so on, that is causing, waters to rise in the Philippines and Indonesia that's going to affect these poor farming communities. Like, this is what we have to think of on a global level. How is something that in the capitalist society that we have, that's, using the earth for our wealth, that they're trying to extract as much as they can from Mother Earth in order to gain prosperity and keep it for themselves. But I'm not thinking of the side effects down the road when we have this climate change, and it's going to expect these poor people in these, small farming communities or fishing communities that survive on the land or the water. And, we could go on and on. The water's been polluted and so on. So it really, it's mind-boggling.
Which all of this is already happening. Yeah. It's not 10 years away.
Right.
This is why people are immigrating from who would leave their home and their family and their community to go into a situation that could be catastrophic, that they could die, why would somebody do that unless it was so hard in the place that they were that they had to, right? So it even goes into the immigration debate. And we're all connected on the microcosm and the macrocosm. When we talk about educating ourselves as, the director of a yoga therapy school, that's what I'm doing. I'm educating myself. I'm trying to listen and learn. It goes all the way from a telephone call that I have with someone as the director of Optimal State Yoga Therapy School, all the way up to, wow, climate change is causing immigration. That's interesting.
Right. Right, exactly. And this is the thing, the shift that needs to happen is until we think of this global populations, when we're already a global community. Now, until we think and change our minds to think globally, it's the same as in the Western medical system. If you think we have a reductionist approach, and now we're figuring out, okay, that's not working. We need to look at the body holistically. It's the same way we need to look at the world. Right. We have a global community now, and there's so many still archaic things in place. We do need to think globally and how that we communicate better with each other rather than these people in power who are so hungry for power, for more power and wanting to protect and be nationalistic and so on. That's just harming the world. And that's why we need this mind shift. I don't know if it's going to happen from the top down, from the government down, because those systems are so archaic and so deeply entrenched. So this is why it comes down to all of us in our own grassroots way. And we've said this before in other podcasts, that we can affect change because we're the majority. From the top is the minority.
And I can say through experience in leadership positions that once people get into power, it becomes about maintaining your power.
Yeah. It becomes very Rajasic, doesn't it?
Yes. I'm in this position now that I have to think like a yoga therapy director of a school instead of thinking of myself as a leader in our community. Okay. Like I constantly switch my mindset, like, okay, yeah, this works for the people in power. This works for, the bottom line financials. This works. But does that actually work for the people on the ground?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And flipping my mind back to being a woman that came up living in poverty most of her life, and having parents that fought for civil rights even though we didn't have food on the table. Going back to that mindset so that I stay connected and learn about these issues from the people that it's impacting.
Yeah. So look, what is it? Like you said, when people get into power, then it's like, I want to maintain this. I'm liking this feeling of power. I do think that the mental qualities do go more rajasic. So obviously some people go into, these powerful positions and they have great intentions, but once they're in there and the ego starts to thrive, the negative ego starts to push through, and then there's this want for, this greed and this power and this disconnection with their true nature happens. Right. But what is it? It's essentially fear, right? It's a fear of being knocked off their pillar or their pedestal. Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, although it has their problems, right? It's dualistic, and we could all comment on the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, but in general, this fourth chapter that is trying to help us understand how not to get wrapped up in our identities, how not to be wrapped up in our attachments, our aversions, our fears, how to surrender that and remember our true nature and that we are all alike at the very deepest layers of our being, and all these layers of power and control and money and image that we put on top, that's not real. Yeah. That we cannot allow ourselves to get too caught up in that. It's so true. And it's also a losing battle, because the one thing we're guaranteed is change. Everything is constantly changing. Energy, we're all comprised of energy, and it's always moving and always changing. So it's a losing battle to try control and try to, control situations and keep your power and so on. And so, I think that getting back to this grassroots and bringing it back to Ayurveda and yoga is like, well, what can we do? And I really believe that everyone comes into this world with their own, we talk about their true nature, their true self, and comes in with their own personality and their skills and talents. And I really do believe that that's what we need to nurture, our innate talent, so that the world needs this diversity of our talents, of our true nature. And if we're conforming or fitting in or, following and afraid to show our true nature, our true colors, well, then we're robbing the world of our talents. So that's a message I want to get across today too, that I think the world needs each one of us with our own skill set, with our own talents, with our own personality to step up and play your part in this. Because again, we're all of us listening to this, we do have power. We have power within our relationships, within our communities.
Right. And I think this is a kind of a call to action, I hope, that can give some ideas on how to get started. I think for a lot of, people of privilege, it's a little scary to step into the stream because you don't know enough and you're afraid you're going to mess up, and you have white shame and white fragility and, all the things that are a natural part of the process of stepping into an unknown area that you're uncomfortable with, but having the courage to say, I'm willing to listen. I need to learn, are there things that you want me to know that clearly I don't know? Having these conversations with other white people so that, and people of privilege and power, so that it isn't an extra burden on the person who comes from diversity to educate us. It's our job to read blogs, to read books, to Google things, to search out. Like when you hear the terms that we're talking about today, like it's every single person's job to go learn about it and try to understand it, and not wait for someone to come and, one-on-one take the time to educate you and deal with your white fragility, which is even more traumatizing.
Yes, right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the thing. We need to change our assumptions. It's like going back to what they said in that book, Work for Us America, like everything we think and do is obviously based on our prior life. Of course it is, right? That's all we know, our prior life experiences. And only when we witness or experience diversity will those assumptions be questioned. So the best way we can do that, one of the best ways I think, is travel. Now, travel is not accessible to everyone, but you can travel now with technology. You don't even need to, a passport and funds to go travel out in the world, which is amazing. But when you could even use, the internet and technology, like you said earlier, TED Talks, and just Googling certain topics and just educating yourself that way. Because when we do expose ourselves to different opinions, that's when we open up our world. And I think it is important to open up our world to different opinions, because of course I think our nature is sometimes to want to, I'm going to hang around this group because they agree with me and they think like me and there's no issues going on here. We're all good. But the moment that, like you have diverse group of people, I think you almost, because everyone's coming from a different perspective, you have to argue your point sometimes more than if you're in your own group. You're like, yeah, you get that, right? Because you've had the same life experiences I had. So you know what I'm talking about. Whereas someone who comes from a different life experience, you have to go, no, this is why I see it this way. And then there's a back and forth. And then you learn something, a different way of looking at things.
Absolutely. In our yoga therapy school, we try to fund scholarships to people of color, to LGBTQ, to underrepresented people.
Fantastic.
In order to bring the message and bring the benefits of this beautiful thing called yoga therapy and Ayurveda to different communities. And, kind of riffing off what you just said, there's a back and forth that happens because we come from such different perspectives.
Right.
Like the expectations that I might have of someone are not always met. And their expectations of me are like, whoa, what are you talking about, lady? And it does take more time, more space, more energy, more communication. You could say more precious resources to have this back and forth and coming to understand one another. But the benefit and the beauty is this richness that you didn't have before. Yeah. And this ability to not stay stuck in your own perspective and understand the perspective of others and invite more perspectives to the table. The richness and beauty that comes out of that and the depth. I mean, the people of color and LGBTQ and underrepresented people that have come into our trainings have made our trainings so much better. Like all the white people are like, oh my God, thank goodness we have different types of people, because the training was so deep and so emotional and so rich. Yeah. It wouldn't have been the same without different perspectives in the room.
Yeah, it's so true. And when you say that, I even think of when I'm doing consults with people of different cultures, right? Because I work online. And it's so interesting for me too, because they're from a different culture, different foods, different lifestyle. And so when I'm tailoring my advice to them, it's like, okay, we've got to work on this together, because I want to, what foods do you normally eat? What's your lifestyle like? And so on. And so it's always interesting, and it's always a cooperation between the two of us to work out a strategy of what fits into their lifestyle, rather than me going, well, can't you eat the same food I eat here? You know what I mean? So working with what food's available there, what you normally eat, what's not working for you, what's working, and so on. What's your day-to-day routine? So I think, yes, and I, learn so much from each person I talk to.
Yes. And it ends up benefiting us.
Yeah.
You might say, well, I don't have the time and resources to invest in, I'm barely holding on by my fingernails with my Ayurveda practice or my yoga therapy school or whatever it is. But what you come to understand is that it's an investment in yourself.
Right.
You change, you benefit. So what you thought you were giving is actually something that you're receiving. It might take a little while to get there and realize that. But that's what ends up happening. And so, I think some of the really practical things that we should all start thinking about doing is, number one, educating ourselves. Like we said, reading books and Googling and watching TED Talks and listening to podcasts about these topics. Number two, not expecting other people who have different ethnicities or races or ages or socioeconomic status. Let's not expect them to educate us. They already are having, race-based trauma injury all day, every day.
Right.
Let's take upon ourselves to do this work. And then making people feel welcome. Just, small demonstrations of all are welcome here. We value your perspective. We value your opinion. Shouting out to people and letting them know we value you. We want you. We need you. It goes so far. I mean, I gave a talk a couple of weeks ago, and the number of emails and texts and Facebook posts or messages that I got saying, hey, thanks for talking about inclusion and diversity. It really meant a lot to me. It was mind-blowing how many people from one tiny little shout out in a speech came back and said that mattered to me. And one day I hope to feel safe in your community.
It's beautiful.
Another idea is, if you're giving trainings, create space and time for people of color, for people of older ages or younger ages or LGBTQ. Create space for them to have support from others like them. And it in one way you could say, well, why do we need to segregate them off to the side? Isn't that racist, or isn't that ageist? But on the other hand, if you create it as, this is a place where you can have some support for your experience in my organization, because I know it's rough being the only XYZ in the room.
Right.
And we want you to feel safe. We want to support you. If you have feedback for us, why don't you get together and talk about it and let us know, if there's things that we're doing that are microaggressions, really just opening up space for dialogue and support and nourishment around that.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for listing out those. I think that's great advice. Really is. And the big thing is not to assume, right? Not to work on those assumptions that you've had, and be ready and open. And we come to that point, I think, and let go of the ego identification, and let go of the fear, and let go of the need for control through our work in Ayurveda and Yoga. And so as we continue on this journey, as we, release all those attachments, that we can open up more.
Right. And, thinking back to watching myself and my friends learn about this and having really awkward questions like, well, only white people show up to my studio. What am I supposed to do about that? That's something I hear quite often. And it's not my fault that only white people come here, that kind of thing.
Right.
Well, we have to be open to listening. Like, if someone shows up and doesn't come back, well, let's contact them and have tea. Or, again, we don't want to put it on them to educate us, but in the end, make ourselves available and listening and inviting other people to have conversations with us. And if they choose to come to the table, we should be grateful that they're willing to be in dialogue with us. We shouldn't be fragile and pushing against them, instead telling them why they're wrong.
Right. Well, that's just something that we need to work on if we're telling them that they're wrong and why they should come, that we need to be curious and, like you said, and wonder what's going on, that people don't, feel comfortable, and why you're not getting a diverse group in your community, in your studio or wherever. What's the obstacle there? And, it's great for business if you open it up and you try to find out what's going on and what's the hurdles that are in place that maybe you could do something about.
Yes. And at the same time, I empathize with the business owner who is trying to do the best they can, entrepreneur with too many balls in the air. Like, I do empathize with them that this is yet another ball in the air, but you know what? It's necessary. It's an important.
Because, absolutely, because again, if we're thinking on the whole, holistically, that it's important to have a diverse group. It's good for business. You'll have more people coming into your door. It brings more creativity in life, and it'll make you a better teacher. And, it just brings more community.
Right. And, it's reminded me of a story. For the last few years, our business, Optimal State, has worked with my local university to give business opportunities to young people who are in, marketing and advertising, basically using them to come into our group and help, into our business and help evaluate and improve our business. Mm-hmm. And my husband and I often have these discussions like, is this worth our time and energy? Because you've got, 20-year-olds who, many times are from the Middle East or from China who maybe don't speak English very well, Hispanics or Black African-American people that maybe have different, perceptions and ideas than we do. And we spend so much time trying to communicate really basic things that maybe if, we had a Caucasian student from a upper socioeconomic status family that, was very much like us, that would just be assumed, right? Mm-hmm, and so we spend so much time trying to understand them and help them understand, here's the goals of our business. No, we don't want it done that way. We have to have it done this way. Mm. That sometimes we feel like, oh, is this worth our time and energy? And if I put it on a spreadsheet, honestly, it doesn't work out with the numbers. Mm-hmm. It really probably isn't a great deal.
Right.
But my spreadsheet is not just numbers.
Right.
My spreadsheet is, how are we serving the world? Mm-hmm. How can I become a better human being? Like those are all on my spreadsheet too. How can I make a difference in the world? How can I help these students learn about business and the benefits that they're getting? That's on the spreadsheet. So I just want to point that out, that it's not easy when you actually have to apply it. And the reason I say this is because you might try it once or twice and say, oh, forget it, that didn't work, I give up. And my message is, could you please include many, many categories on your spreadsheet and look at all the pros and cons for both parties and for the world.
Right. Absolutely. I agree. It's not all about the bottom line, that there's so much more that goes into building a business and into, living a life where you want to be doing the right thing and feeling good and inclusive and so on.
Absolutely. And, I haven't given a shout out to the Indians, especially the women from India. I seem to have like a really natural, nice attraction to them and with them. And we just really love each other. I want to have an open call that in yoga and Ayurveda, we need the grounding and the roots of the Indian culture to stay in the yoga and Ayurveda. And when I looked around our last conference, our national conference, I could count the number of Indians on two hands. I mean, it was shocking to me that we are a yoga community, but we're not including the richness and the source and the knowledge of people that grew up from being in the womb with this knowledge. And so there's no other way forward. We have to invite people. We have to welcome them. We have to value them. We have to acknowledge that they probably know more than us. And that's a good thing because we can learn from them.
It's a very good thing. And you know what comes to my mind, and I've said it before again and again in the podcast, and this is why I think it's so, I find a connection with Indian men and women too when I have them on the podcast, the Indian doctors I've met and I interview, because they are humble. And this is something I think that we need to be humble, less entitlement, because I think sometimes in, our communities, especially if we're used to a life of ease and comfort and privilege, comes entitlement with it.
Right.
So we need to be humble. And all of us, listening to this podcast, we're all in this trying to make a change in ourselves and in the world. And so, giving people advice today, Amy, you gave some great points earlier. And also I would say, try to be more humble that, maybe our way is not the only way, and that by opening ourselves up to new experiences, that letting go of our assumptions and broadening our horizons, that it could be really a rich experience for ourselves. And I think we did a whole podcast on humility. I think it's one of the most important traits in a person, because I think with humility comes an openness to learn. And I think that's what we need more of in our communities.
Well, and when I talk to many Indian women that have much more knowledge than I, they basically said, look, we're living this since we're born, but we do it in our household with our families and our communities. We haven't tried to make a living off of it. We're not out there marketing it and putting ourselves all over the place, because it's a way of life. It's precious. Yeah. And to me, that's so humble. And at the same time, I want to encourage any Indian man or woman that wants to be part of a larger community that is being of service to humanity and bringing this into different cultures and communities. Maybe we need them to come up, not be so humble, and come out of their homes and out of their communities and come and be with us and show us how it's done.
Yeah. Well, we definitely need that knowledge, because our tendency sometimes in the West is to package things up in a little parcel and, brand and market it. And there you go. It's like it's our cultural norm. Right. And this, I fear this is what has happened to the yoga community. I got a little disillusioned with the yoga community when I lived in California and stopped teaching for a while. And, because there was this packaged product. And I certainly don't want, Ayurveda or yoga therapy to go that way. So we need to keep it rooted in the ancient roots, and we need to remain humble. And again, we've said this before, respect the classical text, and respect, obviously, with our new experiences, we can bring more information, and we have to adapt it to our modern world, right? We can't be, living as they did back 5,000 years ago. But what we can do is respect the classical text, and also make sure that we're bringing it into modern life, but not rebranding it and packaging it and disregarding that ancient wisdom. Right. I mean, I'm picturing a tree that has been cut off from its roots, right? That's what it's going to be, this dried up piece of wood. Yeah. And part of this diversity discussion is, when you have ancient wisdom like this and you want to stay connected to the roots, how do you translate that to a truck driver, a middle school teacher, the janitor, the CEO of a company? Like, how do you translate that into a way that can be helpful without doing cultural appropriation? Right? Yes. So that's the other flip side of inclusion and diversity, is as we start to take these beautiful teachings into new communities and help them to learn it in a way that makes sense to them, and still honor where it came from, and like you said, the ancient texts, like there's a really fine balance there, and trying to figure out how to have both, where it's in a language that a middle school teacher at a public university or public school could use, and also, here's where it came from, and we're not trying to hide that, and we appreciate that. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I do think we really need to always be grounded in those roots and always respect that. And, that's our challenge going forward. How do we bring yoga therapy and Ayurveda into this modern world, but still respecting the ancient roots and still respecting that beautiful knowledge that's there and the simplicity in it? Because I think that's what makes it beautiful. Simplicity in the sense that it's in tune with nature, so it feels like a simple. Ayurveda and yoga have great depths to them. But in the fact that it's so in line and in tune with nature, that's why it feels like it's simple, like it's just in alignment and we're flowing when we do that. So that's something that, we all have to be aware of as we teach Ayurveda and yoga. and always maintain that curiosity, and also be yourself. So that you're rooted in yourself, that you're not going into these communities and trying to be something that you're not, because everybody will feel that you're rooted in yourself, but that you're open and curious and asking questions and making sure that, that people feel included.
Right. I think it really comes down to values and beliefs about why are we here, what's important. Yeah. And when you just put, the micro lens on the finances or the resources, or like when you take that kind of capitalistic approach, this model doesn't fit with that. This model fits with the holistic nature of Ayurveda and yoga therapy. And shouldn't we be running our businesses and having values that are in alignment with what we're teaching?
Right.
Instead of, hey, I'm teaching these beautiful ancient texts, and by the way, I'm a capitalist who, the only thing that matters is the spreadsheet with the finances on it. That is a total mismatch. Exactly. It isn't what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so true. We have to be in alignment. And this, of course, we're taking it in communities within yoga and Ayurveda and businesses there, but this is obviously that what needs to happen on a world level, right? Let's see the bigger picture and see how what we do in our communities is affecting everybody else around us. So, yes.
And could I just end on one note? Number one, I hope that we don't just move into spiritual bypassing and just say, oh, it's all good, we're all happy, we're all in unity, we're all one, and think that's enough, because that's not enough. Yeah. That's called spiritual bypassing. So within your or my or anyone that's listening's little world where we have to keep multiple balls in the air, what small things can each of us do? And I'll just tell you a quick story. I had a friend who I gave this, call to action, like, what little thing can you do? And she quickly ran into an underrepresented person and offered a free yoga lesson and gave her a yoga mat. Right? These things matter. Yeah. It doesn't have to be some big, huge thing. Like within your little sphere of your world, can you be more welcoming? Can you open dialogue? Can you be less reactive? Can you let go of some of your fragility? Yeah. Can you offer something to someone who may not otherwise be exposed to it? And if we all just do a bunch of little things and make this part of our daily practice and our values, I think the world could shift.
I agree. It's that grassroots, it works because we are the majority, and there's a lot of things that need to shift in this world, but if we create it within our own communities and remember that we should all care about and support diversity, going back to those 2 dimensions I talked about earlier, it affects everybody. It affects us all. And so we should all care about it. Continue on your path of yoga and Ayurveda. Continue on that journey to your true nature. Stand in your true nature. Like I said earlier, I think we need everybody as they are. Don't conform. Don't fit in. Be unique because we need you in this world. Stand in your truth. And in that truth, then reach out and be curious and be inclusive and don't assume. Be wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. Like we talk about that curiosity of a child. Like, what can I learn from all these other people?
Melody Hobson, the TED interview that I mentioned earlier, she says, be color brave. Oh, instead of color blind, that's spiritual bypassing. Be color brave and dive in and start to educate yourself and give it a shot. Go for it. Let's do it.
Yeah. And just keep that humility and that open heart, because I know all of you out there listening are working towards this. We're all here because we want to make a change in the world. We want to make a change in ourselves and as a result, make a change in our relationships, our community, and our world. So thank you, Amy, for having this conversation today. I think we'll leave it right there. And for anybody listening, if you want to share your story or give us feedback, because myself and Amy would love to hear it, please head on over to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast Facebook group. Leave us a comment. Let us know how we did on this subject. We're very interested in how it's received and also what ways maybe you're being curious and making change in your community, because just those little ideas could really benefit the rest of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Love
Amy,
it.
Thanks a million. I really thought this conversation was an important one, and I really appreciate you being so open and sharing so much with us.
Thank you. And I apologize ahead of time for any way I may have made mistakes out of humility, and I'm very open to receiving feedback.
Likewise, we're doing our best. And I think the listeners understand that, again, we're coming from our perspectives, and maybe we said something that is, you deem to not be politically correct or something. Please share it with us. We're open. We want to continue learning. So if there's something in here that doesn't feel correct to you, feel free to contact us and let us know, because we're always, I'm continuing to live and learn.
Yes.
Thank you, Amy. Take good care of yourself, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you.
So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that conversation on the importance of diversity with Amy. We would love to hear your feedback, as we just said. And also just to remind you of that retreat I mentioned at the start of this episode. I have the discounts going on until July 31st. That's the Ayurveda and Yoga retreat happening right here on the French Riviera in October the 11th to the 13th. And come join the group over at the Elements of Ayurveda podcast Facebook group. I'll put the link in the show notes. Also, I'll put the link for the retreat in the show notes. But over there, that's where I release the episodes a day early, so you get a sneak preview. And we also connect there, and we support each other, and you can ask questions, and lots of things happening over there. So check that out. Thanks again for tuning in. If you feel this episode would help any of your friends or family members, please share. And don't forget, take good care of yourself. Spread that goodness in the world, and we can make a difference by just doing that. Be well, and wishing you all the best. Ciao for now.